When you are editing a tone in the Internal Synthesizer section, the edited tone may have an effect upon any of the programs entered into the patch chains of the unit, altering the sound of the instrument displayed due to the fact that you have edited the tone which makes up the instrument sound. On the display screen here, this is the instrument which is selected from the patch chain, not the actual tone that you are going to edit in the internal synthesizer. Pressing the Part button once will take you to the first page and Part 1. There are 3 parts to this page. Part 1 shows you the instrument assigned to the MIDI channel 1. Pressing the Part button again will take you to Part 2, the instrument assigned and the MIDI channel you can access the instrument from. Pressing the Part button again will take you to the drum channel. This always has the dedicated MIDI channel 10. Scrolling up again using the Part button will return you to Part 1. These 3 parts can be played individually, providing you set the MIDI channel to the correct channel for that instrument from either a MIDI controller keyboard, or you can play all 3 parts with a MIDI controller sequencer. You can also scroll backwards through the same parts using the string button. At the moment, Part 1 is set to MIDI channel 1, and the tone has the same name as the instrument displayed on the performance screen at the beginning of this tutorial. Playing the MIDI controller keyboard will play this instrument here, and due to the fact that the same tone has the same name as the performance screen patch, will also be played on the guitar. While you are in Part 1, if you wish to change the instrument sound on your guitar for playing, you can use the bank and parameter B buttons to scroll up and down in groups of 10 to select a particular instrument, and you can use the value and number buttons to scroll up or down individually through each instrument until you find the one you wish to select. When you select the instrument for your guitar, this will not change the instrument that has been assigned to the MIDI controller keyboard or the sequencer. For example, pressing the bank button will show you Brass Blast. I can play this on the guitar across the notes. But playing a MIDI controller keyboard will not change to this sound, but will remain with the MIDI assigned tone for the external MIDI controller keyboard or sequencer. If you do not have a memory card in the memory card slot and you press the group or parameter A buttons, a message "Card not ready" will appear and will default back to the instrument you had selected for the guitar. To enter the Internal Synthesizer Edit menus, press the Part button once again. This time press Page Up once. You can now see Part Set Part 1. Page 2 allows you to set certain parameters for each of the instruments assigned to either a MIDI controller keyboard or the sequencer. Using the Group and Parameter A buttons, you can scroll up or down through each parameter and use the Value and Number buttons to alter the values for each of the parameters. Pressing the Group button will allow you to set the output level, pan whereabouts in the stereo field you wish the instrument to be played, and select the MIDI channel from 1 to 16 or switch the instrument off. Pressing the Group button again will return you to the Part 1 display screen. Part 1, here the instrument also can be reselected using the Bank or Parameter B buttons, where you can scroll between Bank A and Bank B. If I play the MIDI key now, you'll hear the instrument has changed. Scrolling backwards to Bank A will allow me to play the original instrument. Each bank can be scrolled up or down through using the Number and Value buttons, changing the sound you wish to use with the external MIDI controller or sequencer. Each part can be set the same, apart from the Rythm channel. The Rythm section has a limited number of parameters you can set. Using the Group or Parameter A buttons, you can adjust the output level using the Value and Number buttons. Pressing the Group button again, you cannot adjust the panning as this is preset in the drums themselves. Pressing the Group button again, you can select a MIDI channel other than channel 10, though this is usually the dedicated channel for a drum set. Pressing the Group button again will return you to this screen display. You can also combine all of the instruments as one part if you adjust the MIDI channels all to one channel. For example, if I press the Group button and select the MIDI channel and select channel 1 and press the Part button again and Part 2 I select for channel 1, you will hear all three sounds combined. Like so. Changing the sounds on this page will not affect the sound you are playing at the same time with your guitar. The sound you select for your guitar is selected with the patch chain section. From this page, pressing the page up again will take you to the Timb Edit section. The functions for the buttons on this page can be a little confusing. The Part and String buttons no longer serve any function at all. The bank and parameter B buttons will allow you to scroll backwards and forwards through banks of sounds. You have the internal bank, where you can program and save the edited sounds. You have bank A, in which you can select a sound from. Bank B, and the Rythm section, where you can select an individual sound and edit this. Pressing the bank button again will return you to the sound bank you were on when you began. You can also select any of the sounds from this section to play on your MIDI sequencer or your MIDI controller keyboard, including the Rythm section. You can select an individual sound from this section and play it through your MIDI keyboard or your sequencer as one instrument without the rest of the drum kit. For example, if I use the value and number buttons and scroll up to an open hi-hat and play a MIDI keyboard, you'll hear the sound. This applies through all of the notes on your instrument. This section does not affect the tone you have selected on your guitar if you are playing this, until you save the edited section into the internal synthesizer and use it as part of your patch program. The group and parameter A buttons will allow you to scroll up or down through a number of parameters which will affect all of the different banks together when being used on either an external sequencer or a MIDI keyboard. Scrolling up, you have the pitch shift. This will allow you to transpose the key up or down by 24 semitones. Using the group button and scrolling up again will allow you to fine-tune the instruments when being used. Scrolling up again is the pitch bend. This will allow you to control the bend of the pitch up to 24 semitones using your MIDI controller keyboard. Pressing the group button again will take you to the assign mode. When playing the instrument, you have a single assign mode 1. This is last note priority. In this mode, when more than one note on message is received by the same note or pitch on the same MIDI channel, the sound of the note is muted once, then played again. Scrolling up using the number button to assign mode 2 is a single assign mode with first note priority. In this mode, when more than one note on message is received by the same note, as in pitch, on the same MIDI channel, the two sounds are mixed. Scrolling up to assign mode 3 is a last note priority. In this mode, when the GR50 has received more note on messages than the maximum of voices, the earlier messages are replaced by the later ones. And assign mode 4 is first note priority. In this mode, when the GR50 has received more note on messages than the maximum of voices, the later messages are ignored, retaining the current playing sounds. Pressing the group button again will return you to the first submenu in the Timb Edit section, where you will see the name of the instrument. You can also scroll backwards through all the parameters using the Parameter A button. If you use the Group button or Parameter A button to scroll to a parameter, here you'll find it can be a bit confusing, because if you now use the Bank or Parameter B buttons, this will allow you to scroll up or down, providing you are in a parameter that will allow this to happen, to go through the parameters until you reach the name of the instrument again. From here, the Parameter B and Bank buttons will default back to allowing you to select the banks in which you wish to choose the instrument from. And then you can scroll up and down through the instruments using the number and value buttons. The Group and Parameter A buttons are dedicated buttons to the parameters. This is where you can be confused if you are not careful, so do not be confused between the two sets of buttons. If you are in the parameter and you press the Bank or Parameter B buttons, this will scroll you back up through the parameters or down until you reach the name of the instrument. Once you have selected the instrument for editing, to save the parameters you have adjusted for the tone, press the right copy button once. The display screen will show you the location the timbre is at the present. If you wish to change the location, press the Group or Parameter A buttons, and this will take you from Bank A to Bank B. If you have a card in the memory card slot that you can write to, if you press the Group button again, this will take you to the card's location. You'll also have Bank A and Bank B to choose from. You can scroll backwards and forwards to either banks using the Group and Parameter A buttons. If you wish to select another bank, use the Bank or Parameter B buttons to scroll backwards and forwards in groups of 10 from the original location. You can use the Value and Number buttons to scroll up or down through each individual location until you find the place you wish to select. Once you have selected the location, press Enter once. This will ask you if you are sure where you wish to write the timbre into. Press the right copy button once. This will ask you if you wish to turn off the memory protect. In doing so, at the same time it will rewrite the parameters for that timbre. When you are ready, press the Enter button and this will complete the procedure. If you decide you have no wish to alter the parameters after all, simply press Page Back once. This will return you to the Timbre Edit screen, where the original timbre sound is located. Once you have finished editing the parameters and saving them in the Timbre Edit section, to return to the Patch Chain Performance screen, press Page Back until you see the Patch Chain and Tune Play light turn green. You will also see the Patch Chain Performance program, the bank and the number the program is situated in. You'll also notice there is no asterisk on the screen. This reaffirms you are now out of the edit mode. To edit the rhythm section and rearrange the drum kit for a sequencer or a MIDI keyboard, press the Part button and then press the Part button again and again until you find the Part rhythm channel. Press the Page Up button twice. This will allow you to edit the tones for the rhythm section. Using the value and number buttons will allow you to select a tone for the note for the drum kit. You use the part and string buttons to select the note for the part to be incorporated into the drum kit. Once you have selected the sound for the note, the bank and parameter B buttons and group and parameter A buttons both serve the same function and will allow you to scroll up or down through another set of parameters to control how the sound is used. Using the group button, you can set the output level for the individual sound of that note. Pressing the group button again will allow you to scroll from left to right in the stereo field for where you wish to place the sound. Pressing the group button again will allow you to turn the reverb on and off for that particular note. Pressing the group button again will return you to the note and the sound you are selecting for it. Once you have completed the drum kit edits, you can then return to the previous page and the sound you were playing. The drum kit edits are automatically saved into the unit's memory, and if you turn the power off, will not be erased. If you further wish to save the rhythm section edits, you can do this if you have a card in the memory card slot you can write to. Press the right copy button once. The screen will show you Save to Card. The bottom line will show you what it is asking you to save. To find the correct section, use the value or number buttons to scroll up or down until you find the part you wish to save. You can also use the bank and parameter B buttons and the group and parameter A buttons, which are also used for the same functions. When you are ready, press Enter once. This will ask you if you are sure. Press the right copy button and this will save to the card. This ends the procedure. From the Timb edit mode, pressing the Page Up button will take you to the first of the parameters for page 4. This is commonly known as the Tone Edit Common mode. This will affect the overall tones you have selected to edit in the Partials section. Do not confuse the Naming section with the one in the Patch Edit Common naming section. The Common naming section in the Patch Edit is covered in part 1 of the tutorial. This parameter allows you to give a name to a tone you are working on or editing by using the bank and parameter B buttons to scroll backwards and forwards across the letters, and by using the value and number buttons to change the letters until you have chosen the name you wish to use. Scrolling up using the group button will take you to the first parameter. This refers to the structure for the partials 1 and 2. There are 13 structures in which you can choose from. Each structure offers a different combination of either the square and sawtooth waveforms to be used, or the PCM sound samples to be combined in various ways. Or you can combine the PCM sound samples and the square or sawtooth waveforms together in different ways. Using either the bank and parameter B buttons or the number and value buttons, which both serve the same purpose, will allow you to scroll up and down through the structures. Pressing the group button again will scroll you to the next set of partial structures parameter. This will combine partials 3 and 4. In the same way, structures 1 and 2 can be combined, using the same array of buttons. From the structure parameter, using the group button, you can scroll up to the partials mute section. Here you can switch on and off each of the partials so you can listen to while you are editing what you are doing with the partials parameters. Using either the number and value buttons. The bank and parameter B buttons will allow you to scroll backwards and forwards through each of the partials mute section. Scrolling up from the partial mute section using the group button is the Envelopr mode parameter. This selects whether to receive or ignore the note off messages in the envelope of each partial. Normally this should be set to normal. When used with no sustain, this can be used for programming a rhythm tone, etc. You can use the bank and parameter B buttons or the value and number buttons, which both serve the same function, to switch the sustain on or back to normal. Pressing the group button again will return you to the naming page. You can also scroll backwards through each of the parameters using the parameter A button to the one you wish to edit. From the Tone Edit Common menu, using the Part button, you can scroll up to the first of the partials. There are 4 partials in which you can edit. Each one has its own identical set of parameters from partial 1. To scroll up to each partial, press the Part button and this can take you from 1 to 4. If you scroll one more time, this will return you to the Tone Edit Common menu. You can press the Part button again and this will then take you back to partial 1. Equally, you can use the String button to scroll down through each of the partials from the Tone Edit Common menu. The wave generator offers the square and sawtooth waveforms, as well as PCM sound samples to choose from. The first parameter here sets the pitch up and down the instrument on where you wish to place the octaves between the partials. Using the number and value buttons, you can scroll backwards and forwards through the notes in semitones. Scrolling up from the pitch parameter using the bank button is the fine-tuning of the pitch between each partial. You can also change the values on the fine-tune with the number and value buttons. Moving to the next parameter setting using the bank button is the pitch key follower, commonly known as the tracking of the octaves up and down the pitch of the instrument. The tracking can be set up and down the pitch using the number and value buttons. Pressing a note above middle C, you'll hear the pitch changing as I play the note. Pressing the number button again, S1 stands for stretching of the pitch at 1% per octave. S2 allows you to stretch the pitch 5% per octave. You can also set the pitch in reverse on your instrument. Using the value button and pressing a lower note key, you'll hear the pitch change again. On the 0 setting, this allows you to select a note in which you can play up and down the instrument in octaves without the pitch changing. From 0, using the value button, you can then reverse the octaves up and down the instrument so the lower octave plays at the top of the instrument and the top octaves play at the lower part of the instrument. Playing a note, you'll hear the shift in the octaves moving up the instrument from the lower note position. From this value, if I press the value button again, this will then reverse the octaves back to their original settings but stretched at number 2 octave. You can then scroll back down again using the value buttons to where you wish to place the octave pitch tracking. Scrolling up from the pitch tracking parameter using the bank button is the pitch bend switch. You can switch the pitch bend on and off using the number and value buttons between each of the partials. Scrolling up again is the waveform selection. Using the value or number buttons, you can scroll between the square and sawtooth waveforms. Moving to the next parameter with the bank button is the PCM sound sample banks. You have 2 banks to choose from. You can choose the bank using the value and number button. From the PCM sound sample banks, using the bank button, this will then take you to the bank you have selected sound samples, and you can select the sound samples equally using the value and number buttons. The next parameter after the sound sample selection banks using the bank button is the pulse width generator. The pulse width generator cannot be used on the PCM sound samples, but will only affect the square and sawtooth waveforms. The pulse width generator can alter the characteristics of the square wave. A square wave is set in equal sides up and down and across its waveform. Using the pulse width can then alter the characteristic and give different types of timbre tones. As an example, if I press a note set to 0 on the pulse width for a square wave, you'll hear a hollow sound. Setting the value of the pulse width to its maximum with the value button and pressing a lower note, you will hear the harmonics of the square wave has changed. If I move it back to 0, you'll hear the slight difference. Depending upon the next parameter you use is how much it will affect the square wave. The pulse width can also affect the sawtooth differently. Playing a sawtooth waveform with the pulse width set at 0 and then setting the value back to the 100, you'll hear the octave drop. Depending upon the value of the pulse width is how this will affect the note performance. Leaving the pulse width at the maximum and scrolling up to the next parameter is the pulse width's velocity curve. The velocity curve parameter affects the way you play the sound on your instrument if you are using either a square or sawtooth waveform and are using the pulse width generator set at higher values. The velocity curve allows for hard and soft touch response on how you play the sound. Playing a note below middle C and setting a high value on the velocity curve, you'll hear the difference. You can also set the curve to a negative value. This allows you to play the instrument differently, so it reverses how you play from hard to soft. Depending upon how you have set the pulse width generator's values is to how much this will have an effect on the playing style. Scrolling up from the pulse width velocity parameter using the bank button will return you to the pitch setting of the wave generator. You can also scroll backwards using the parameter B through each parameter in reverse. Scrolling up to the next set of parameters using the group button is the pitch envelope generator. This section can be used with the PCM sound samples and the square and sawtooth waveforms. The envelope generator can affect the pitch of the note on your instrument when played with the parameters you can use and the depth setting. You can scroll backwards and forwards through the parameters using the bank and parameter B buttons as you edit the parameter with the value and number buttons. As an example, if I play a note on the lower octave and alter the value of the depth setting, increment at a time, you'll hear the note eventually changing its pitch form. Scrolling up from the depth parameter is the velocity tracking of the pitch from the lower octaves to the higher octaves on your instrument. This tracks how hard or soft you play your instrument as to how much it will affect the pitch envelope depth when you are playing. Playing a note and altering the value, you'll hear a difference as I play the note from softer to harder. Also, up the upper part of the octaves, you can hear how the pitch changes on the note on how you are playing it with the instrument. Scrolling up to the next parameter using the bank button is the time key follower. This tracks the beginning of the envelope when you play the note. The difference of the tracking from the bottom to the top depends on how you set the value. If I play a note on the lower octave, if you listen to the attack time of the pitch from 0 to moving up the values, you'll hear a marked difference. The attack time has slowed down. Equally, if I play a note above middle C and begin the process again of altering the values of the timing, you'll hear the envelope shape has changed to a faster time curve as you play. Scrolling up to the next parameter is the attack time for the initial beginning of the pitch rise of the envelope. Moving to the second parameter is the decay time of the first pitch level of the envelope. Scrolling up again is a third attack time for a second part of the pitch envelope. Scrolling up again, this is the decay time for the sustain level, which will go to a last parameter. Scrolling up to the next parameter is the initial beginning of where the note will start from when you play it. Minus values will take the note beginning from below middle C, and positive values will raise the note above middle C to begin when you play. Moving on to the next parameter is the first level where the pitch will rise to or fall to, depending upon the positive or negative value of the parameter. You can set a second level using another set of values. From this level, scrolling up will take you to the sustain level of the pitch. Here you can see the parameter's value is positive. This will hold the note above the pitch once it has been played. The T4, or the time decay of number 4, will affect how the note fades downwards or upwards to the last of the level parameters. Scrolling up is the last of the level parameters where the note will rest, above or below middle C depending upon the value setting you have set for it. Here you can see the envelope of the pitch and how the parameters alter the pitch when you set them when using the envelope generator. The lowest level is where the pitch will finish, and once you release the note will return to the original pitch of the key you are playing. Scrolling up again will return you to the pitch envelope's depth setting. Scrolling up from the pitch envelope generator using the group button is the pitch's LFO rate. This allows you to introduce the kind of effect like a vibrato, depending upon the depth setting. Here you can set the rate of the vibrato using the value and number buttons. This can be applied to both the square and sawtooth waveforms and the PCM sound samples. Scrolling up using the bank button is the depth of the oscillator. Depending upon its depth is how much of an effect it will have on the note. The higher the value, the deeper the sound will be affected by. This can give great movement to the note you are playing or the sound you are creating. Pressing the bank button will scroll you up to the modulation rate. This setting is for the external synthesizer modulation wheel or the switches on your pickup for the guitar, depending upon if they have been programmed and set to activate the LFO or not. As aforementioned, each partial has its own identical settings, so you could apply the pitch LFOs to any of these partials when creating your sound. Pressing the bank button again will return you to the rate setting parameter. Scrolling up from the pitch LFO parameters using the group button is the TVF, time variant frequency, also known in analog terms as the voltage control frequency parameter. This section cannot be used with the PCM sound samples, but is used with the square and sawtooth waveforms. This is a low-pass filter. and the higher the values, the more of the frequencies are allowed to pass through. The lower the values, the less of the higher frequencies are allowed to pass through and can change the square and sawtooth waveforms into more of a sine wave when the lower values are selected. As an example, using a square waveform, the frequency is set at its maximum value. Adjusting the value down, if I play a lower note from middle C at the maximum frequency, you'll hear how high the frequency is at the moment and the clarity of the tone. Using the value button and scrolling down to 50% and pressing the note again, you'll hear a slight reduction in the frequencies coming through. Scrolling up to the next parameter using the bank button is the resonant part of the filter. This boosts the cutoff point of the frequency you have set. The resonance ranges from 0 to 30 at its maximum. This works in conjunction with other parameters which you may set, including the Envelopr part of the filter, when you are using the resonance part of the filter. As an example, pressing a low note below middle C and then setting its resonance to the maximum, you'll hear a slight difference in the tone of the note. From here, if you scroll up using the bank button again to the next parameter, this is the frequency key follower, also known as the tracking for the frequency up and down the octaves of the instrument you are playing. This can affect the way the resonance part of the filter and the filter itself is used when you are playing a note, depending upon the bias setting of where the note is going to be played above or below the middle C for the effect to take place. Leaving the resonance filter set to its maximum and moving the tracking up the octaves, if you hear the tone above middle C and I move the tracking up with it, you'll hear a difference. This also depends upon the bias point of the key following setting. If I play a low note below middle C, you'll hear a difference. This has now cut off the frequency to the lower sections of the octaves. You can scroll up and down through the octaves in increments, above and below the 0 point of where the bias point is set, using the value and number buttons. Here, the 0 point, if I play a note above and below middle C, you can hear the difference there. If I go below the bias point setting, which is the maximum you can go below at the negative settings, and I play the note, you'll hear the difference. Playing above the bias point, you'll hear the sound has diminished until you get to a point where the bias begins to take effect. Scrolling up using the bank button to the next parameter is the bias point setting. Here you can see it has been set at E3 below middle C. You can move this bias point using the value and number buttons at any point in the octaves to begin the tracking for the frequency of the filter. This can also help you level out the way the filter is adjusted up and down the octaves when playing your instrument. As an example, resetting the bias point with the number and value buttons, playing a note on the lower octaves, you'll hear the change in how the filter and the resonance has been tracked up and down the instrument. Depending upon how you set these points, and moving to the next parameter using the bank button, the bias level is how it will affect the overall sound you are editing. The bias level works in conjunction with the bias point settings. The higher the value, the more the filter will be opened up from the bias point setting upwards or downwards from the point of setting. As an example, if I move the value up and play the lower notes, you'll hear the difference in how the filter has opened. Playing a note further up the instrument, the higher the value can also give you more extreme sound. Lowering the level to a negative value on the bias and playing a top note, you'll hear from the bias point setting either downwards or upwards depending on the value you have set, is how it will affect the filter itself. Pressing a top note on the instrument, you'll hear a difference, and moving down the octaves you'll hear the filter beginning to reduce in sound. Until the filter no longer has any effect on the lower octaves. Scrolling up using the bank button will return you to the TVF frequency parameter. Scrolling up from the TVF frequency filter using the group button is the TVF envelope generator. This shapes the way the filter opens and closes through the next set of parameters. The depth parameter allows how much of the filter is to open or close, depending upon the value set with the value and number buttons. As an example, playing a note on the lower part of the octaves and closing down the depth value, you'll hear less of the filter coming through. The higher the value, the depth of the filter changes. Once you have set the depth of how the envelope will affect the filter, press the bank button and this will take you to the velocity curve. Here you can set the sensitivity of how you play your instrument from a soft touch to a harder playing style. Using higher values will increase the way the sensitivity works with the envelope. As an example, at its highest value, if I play a note softly and then play it hard, you'll hear the difference. From here, if you use the bank button, you can scroll up again. The depth key follower gives you more control over how you play the filter with your playing style. The 0 settings will have no immediate effect, but once you set the values higher, will affect the lower and upper octaves differently. As an example, playing a lower key and a higher key and setting the value to the highest value and playing the same notes again and the higher one, you hear the range has changed. Scrolling up to the next parameter using the bank button is the time key follower. From the depth key follower, using the bank button and scrolling up to the next parameter is the time key follower. This parameter can affect the envelope settings of the attack and sustain levels of the envelope from the lower to the upper octaves of the instrument, depending upon the value set. At 0 settings, if I press a lower note and a higher note and then reset the time key follower to its highest value and play the same notes again, you'll hear the envelope has moved. The attack time has moved forward to a longer time, and the upper octave has shortened the attack time. This first set of parameters are best left until you have set up the envelope and the envelope's depth, so you can better understand how the rest of these parameters will affect your playing. From the time key follower, pressing the bank button will take you to the first of the envelope's parameters, the attack time to the first level. The envelope generator consists of 2 attack times, 3 decay times, 3 points at which you can open the envelope level to, and a sustain level to hold the envelope open until the final decay time. From the attack time parameter 1, scrolling up is the first of the decay times. Then you have the second attack time, and then the second decay time, and the third of the decay times, which follows after the sustain level. From here, scrolling up is the first level, then the second level, and the third level. Then it moves to the sustain level parameter. From here you can scroll up again, and this will return you to the envelope's depth setting. From the time variant frequency envelope generator, pressing the group button will take you to the time variant amplifier's parameters. The level parameter sets how loud the envelope of the amplifier can be played. Using the number and value buttons will adjust the level itself. Scrolling up from the amplifier's level parameter using the bank button is the velocity parameter. This sets the sensitivity of how hard or soft you play your instrument as to how this will affect the volume, depending upon the value set by the value and number buttons. Scrolling up from the velocity curve parameter using the bank button is the first of 2 bias point settings, where you can set the volume to be reduced from a key on the octaves. Once you have set the key with the value and number buttons, scrolling up using the bank button is the first of the levels. This will dictate the volume's reduction from that point of the bias level setting. As an example, if I play a note higher up the octave and play it down lower, and then increase the negative value, you'll hear the higher notes are now reduced in volume. And as I move down the octaves, you'll begin to hear the volume increasing again. From bias point level 1, scrolling up using the bank button is the second of the bias point parameter settings. At the moment it is set at G4 below middle C. If I scroll up again using the bank button to the second of the level parameters and play a note on the lower octave and move up the octaves and then increase the negative value of the level, you'll hear a reduction in the volume of sound on the lower octave until you begin to move up the octave from where the bias point was set, and the volume will begin to increase again. This gives you more control over how the envelope of the volume is set. Scrolling up from bias level 2 parameter using the bank button will return you to the amplifier's level parameter. Scrolling up from the overall settings for the volume level using the group button are the amplifier's envelope generator. This section is used to shape the volume of the sound. Beginning with the time key follower, also known as the tracking for the volume from the lower octaves to the higher octaves, if you listen to the envelope when I play a lower note, the parameters you set for the envelope itself will remain unchanged while the value is at 0. If I change the value using the number and value buttons to the extreme of its setting and press the note again, listen to the envelope and how it has changed. The envelope has now lengthened on the attack and the decay parameters. Equally, if I press a key on the upper octaves, you'll hear the change is different again. Pressing the value button down and beginning the key again, you'll hear the parameters change. The volume of the note has now shortened. This is how the tracking affects the way the envelope is set when you play from the lower octaves to the higher octaves depending upon the value you have set for this parameter. Scrolling up from the time key follower using the bank button is the time key follower's velocity curve. This can affect the note when you play your instrument, depending on how hard or soft you play. At 0 there will be no effect upon the envelope. As an example, if I play a note on the lower octave, the parameters for the envelope I have set remain unchanged, irrelevant to if I play hard or soft. If I change the value to a high value and play the note again hard, you'll hear the envelope change from the attack and release times from where I have originally set the parameters. I can now play it softly and it will introduce the note slowly again. If I play a note higher up the octaves, it will also have the same effect. The time key follower and the velocity curve for the follower will give more of a creative effect when you are playing your instrument. Scrolling up to the next set of parameters using the bank button in this section are the timing values for the attack and decay times. Timing 1 is for the initial level of the attack time for the volume. Time 2 is for the decay time. Timing 3 is for another attack time. Timing 4 is also for a decay time. And timing 5 is for the decay time of the sustain level of the volume you have set. L1 is the first of the parameters you can set your volume level to. Scrolling upwards, you have level 2, level 3, and then you have the sustain level. This will hold the note until either you release the note or, if you set the decay time, will fade out naturally. Scrolling up again from the sustain level parameter will return you to the envelope's time key follower. When editing the parameters in a partial, you can actually copy these to another partial in the same tone if you wish to, as a shortcut. Or if you wish to copy a set of parameters from a partial from another tone, you can also do this using the copy write function. To do this, you select the partial you wish to copy the partial's parameters you are copying from to. by using the Part button. For example, if I wish to copy partial 1 into partial 2, then I would select the partial 2 parameters ready for this procedure. Press the right copy button twice. The screen will default you to Bank A, Location 1. To change this, use the Bank or Parameter B buttons to scroll backwards and forwards to the bank to copy the parameters from. Use the Value or Number button to scroll up to the location of the tone and the partial you are copying. This will copy all of the parameters in that partial to the location you have selected, which in this case was partial 2 from the same tone. When you are ready, press the Enter button once. This will complete the procedure and will default you back to a parameter you were editing previously. If you decide not to continue copying the edited parameters to the other location, simply press the Page Back button once and this will default you back to the parameter you were working on at the time. To complete the procedure, press Enter, and this has now returned you to the parameter you were working on. When you have completed the copying procedure, you will have to then write the whole of the parameters into the tone itself using the tone write procedure. To do this, scroll down using the string or scroll up using the Part button until you get to the Tone Edit Common Parameters. Press the right copy button once. This will ask you to write all the changes you have made to the tone into the location. When you are ready, press Enter. This will ask you if you are sure. If you change your mind, just press the Page Back button once and this will return you to the previous screen. When you are ready, press the right copy button once. This will ask you if you wish to turn off the Memory Protect. When you press Enter, this will then complete the whole procedure, including the writing of the new parameter settings to the tone, and will return you to the previous screen. If you do not complete this procedure and you change your tone on the previous page, you will then lose all edited parameters, or if you turn off the power to the unit, this will also lose all the parameter changes you have made. When you have finished editing the parameters in a partial and you have saved them to the tone, if the tone is being used in the patch bank patch chain, this may alter some of the sounds in the patch chain instruments if they are using the tone you have edited. To edit the parameters in a patch with your guitar, follow this procedure. On the patch edit buttons, press the internal button once. Use the group or parameter A buttons to scroll up or down until you find the patch name. If it does not display the patch name, use the value and number buttons to scroll up and down until you find the patch you wish to edit. Press the Page Back button and return to the performance display screen. Press the Part button and make sure the patch name appears on the screen. Press the Page Up button. Also make sure that the patch name appears on the second screen, the Part Set Part 1 screen. Press the Page Up button again to the Timb Edit section and make sure the tone is also the same as what is on the patch. Press the page up button again, and from here select the parameter you wish to edit. As an example, I have chosen the pitch envelope depth to show the edit and how to implement it. Setting the value to its maximum and pressing the right copy button and following the right copy procedure, then press the page back button and return to the performance screen. If the buttons on your guitar are programmed to change the patch program, use the buttons and change the program and go up and then down back to the program patch you are editing. This will then implement the edit of the parameter. Once you have done this, if you are happy and satisfied with the edit, press the part button and scroll forward using the page up buttons to return to the Timb edit screen. From here, use the right copy function procedure to save the edit into the Timb. This will complete the procedure for editing the parameter in one of the partials you have selected. If you decide you no longer wish to have the edit, go to the page up button and return to the parameter you have edited and undo what you have edited, and go through the right copy procedure again. From here, page back to the Timb edit section and use the right copy procedure again, and then return to the performance display screen. And using your buttons, change the patch once and then back, and this will implement the parameter edit change again. This ends the procedure. The right copy button has many options available when you press. You can save to card, and using the part or string button you can scroll up or down through the options available until you find the option you are looking for. Once you have done this, you can use the group and parameter A buttons or the bank and parameter B buttons or the number and value buttons to assign what you wish to do. This 6 set of buttons all offer the same function. When you have finished, you can then return to the page of the performance display screen. If at some point you become confused by pressing a wrong button and end up on a page you are not expecting to be on, the simplest way to find your way back to where you wish to be is to page back through the pages until you get back to the performance display screen. Then press the part button once and select the part you wish to continue with. Press the page up button until you find where you wish to be with the parameters. And then from there, use the part and string buttons to scroll up or down through the partials until you find the parameter you are going to edit. When you move backwards and forwards, sometimes if you are using the string and part button, if I use this and press the bank button as an example and then scroll down to the tone edit common and then scroll back up to the partial, it will default back to the first part of the parameter settings, the frequency in this case, instead of where I was at originally. In this case, simply use the bank or parameter B button to scroll up or down back to the parameter you were adjusting.